Most debates about Jesus focus on what he did, whether he performed miracles, whether he rose from the dead, whether he was who he claimed to be. But there is a question that comes before all of those. Did he exist at all? It is a question that sounds provocative, and for most of history, it wasn't seriously asked, because the answer seemed obvious. But in the last 2 centuries, as historical scholarship became more rigorous, a new demand emerged. Show us the evidence outside of the Bible. Show us sources that have no reason to promote Christianity. Show us what people who were not his followers wrote about him. Those sources exist. They are older than most people realize. They come from people who had every reason to ignore him or discredit him. And what they recorded changes the conversation entirely. This is scripture in stone. In the year 64 AD, the city of Rome burned. The fire lasted 6 days. Entire districts were destroyed. The Emperor Nero, facing accusations that he had started it himself, needed someone to blame. He chose the Christians. What followed was one of the first organized persecutions of the movement. And in writing about it, a Roman senator named Tacitus recorded something he clearly did not intend as a compliment. Tacitus was not a Christian. He called Christianity a destructive superstition. He had no reason to promote its founder or validate its claims. But in his annals, written around 116 AD, he recorded the following. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus. 3 details, all verifiable, all consistent with the gospel accounts. The name, Christus. The executioner, Pontius Pilatus. The emperor at the time, Tiberius. Tacitus was not writing theology, he was writing history, and he recorded the execution of Jesus as a historical fact, the way a Roman senator records any administrative event, with bureaucratic precision and without interest in what it meant. He was not alone. Around 112 AD, Pliny the Younger, a Roman magistrate governing a province in modern-day Turkey, wrote a letter to Emperor Trajan asking for guidance. His problem: Christians were refusing to worship Roman gods. They were meeting before dawn, singing hymns to Christ as to a god, and taking oaths not to commit fraud, theft, or adultery. Pliny had no interest in Christianity. He found it inconvenient and politically disruptive. But his letter confirmed something significant. Within 80 years of the crucifixion, the movement had spread from Jerusalem to the far edges of the Roman Empire, and the person at the center of that movement was being treated as a historical figure, not a myth. Suetonius, another Roman historian writing in the same era, recorded that Emperor Claudius expelled Jews from Rome because of disturbances caused by one called Christus. Historians debate whether Christus refers to Christ directly. What is not debated is the broader picture. 3 Roman writers, 3 different documents, 3 different purposes, none of them Christian, all of them writing about the same figure, as if his existence required no argument, because for them, it didn't. In the year 70 AD, the Roman army destroyed Jerusalem. The temple was burned, the city was leveled, and a Jewish military commander named Joseph ben Matityahu, who had surrendered to the Romans during the siege, was given a new name, Roman citizenship, and a commission to write the history of his people. He became known as Flavius Josephus. He was not a Christian. He was a Jewish historian working for the Roman Empire, and he had every political reason to distance himself from any movement the Romans considered subversive. In approximately 93 AD, Josephus completed a work called Antiquities of the Jews, a comprehensive history of the Jewish people from creation to his own time. In it, he mentioned Jesus, twice. The first mention, known to scholars as the Testimonium Flavianum, has been debated for centuries. The version that survived contains phrases no Jewish historian in the 1st century would write, references to Jesus as the Messiah and to his resurrection. Most historians agree. Christian scribes added those phrases later. But beneath the additions, something remains. An Arabic version of the text, preserved independently, offers what scholars believe is closer to what Josephus actually wrote. At this time there was a wise man who was called Jesus. His conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous. And many people from among the Jews and the other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die. Those who had become his disciples did not abandon him. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion. No claim of divinity, no theology, just a record, the way a court historian records events he finds notable but does not necessarily believe. The second mention is shorter and more significant. Writing about the execution of a man named James, Josephus identifies him with a single phrase: the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ. No elaboration, no argument, just a casual reference, the kind a writer makes when he assumes his audience already knows who he means. Josephus was not trying to prove Jesus existed. He was writing about someone else entirely, and that is precisely what makes it credible. The most persuasive historical evidence is rarely the evidence designed to persuade. It is the passing reference, the bureaucratic notation, the mention made by someone with no interest in the outcome of the argument. Josephus had no interest in Christianity, but he recorded its founder as a historical person, the same way he recorded kings, priests, and Roman governors. As someone who had lived, and whose absence from the record would have required an explanation. In November 1990, construction workers in Jerusalem were clearing ground in a place called the Peace Forest when their equipment struck something unexpected: a burial cave. Inside, archaeologists found 12 stone ossuaries, bone boxes used in first-century Jewish burial practice. On one of them, inscribed twice in Aramaic, were the words, "Joseph, son of Caiaphas." The high priest Caiaphas appears in all 4 Gospels. He is the man who presided over the trial of Jesus, the man who declared that one person should die for the sake of the nation. Until 1990, he was known only through those accounts. The ossuary is now in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. It contains the bones of 6 individuals, including a 60-year-old male that many archaeologists believe to be Caiaphas himself. No other artifact recovered from this period connects so directly to a named participant in the events surrounding the crucifixion. The man who condemned Jesus left his name carved in stone. In 2004, a sewage pipe broke in the southern part of Jerusalem's Old City. Repair workers digging beneath the street uncovered something no one expected to find: a series of wide stone steps leading down into a large plastered pool. Archaeologists were called immediately. The dating was confirmed to the Second Temple period, the 1st century BC through the 1st century AD. The steps, the size, the construction style, all consistent with the period of Jesus' ministry. The Gospel of John describes Jesus sending a man born blind to wash in the Pool of Siloam. The man went, he washed, and he came back seeing. For centuries, a Byzantine-era pool had been identified as the site. Scholars debated whether it was authentic. What was found beneath the street in 2004 was the original pool. Not a reconstruction, not a symbol. The actual stepped pool where the account was set, confirmed by independent archaeological dating, with no religious motivation behind the discovery. A broken pipe found it. On the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee lies the ancient city of Capernaum. The Gospels describe it as the base of Jesus' ministry, the city where he taught in the synagogue, where he called his first disciples, and where he entered the house of a fisherman named Peter and healed his mother-in-law of a fever. Archaeologists excavating Capernaum in the mid-20th century found a first-century house that had been used as a place of Christian worship from a remarkably early date. The walls carried graffiti in Greek, Aramaic, Syriac, and Hebrew, references to Jesus as Lord, to Peter by name, to the act of worship. In the 5th century, a large octagonal church was built directly over the site. In the ancient world, churches were not built randomly. They were built over places considered sacred, places where something had happened that the community refused to forget. The house had been venerated for centuries before anyone thought to build a church above it. That pattern of continuous veneration, beginning within living memory of the events themselves, is precisely what archaeologists look for when they try to determine whether a site is authentic. The fisherman's house in Capernaum has been continuously identified as significant since the 1st century. Not because a text said so, because people who were there, or close to those who were, kept coming back. Let us be precise about what we have examined. A Roman senator writing 50 years after the crucifixion recorded the execution of Jesus under Pontius Pilate as an established historical fact. A Roman magistrate writing 80 years after the crucifixion described a movement spreading across the empire, organized around a person its followers treated as having actually lived. A Jewish historian, working for the Roman Empire, with no interest in promoting Christianity, mentioned Jesus twice. Once in a passage that scholars believe was partially altered, and once in a passing reference so casual it assumes the reader already knows who Jesus is. A bone box bearing the name of the high priest who condemned Jesus was found beneath a construction site in Jerusalem in 1990. A pool described in one specific miracle account was found beneath a broken sewage pipe in 2004. A house in Capernaum has been continuously venerated as the home of Peter since the 1st century, within living memory of the events described. This is what the evidence shows. Now let us be equally precise about what it does not show. It does not confirm the miracles. It does not confirm the resurrection. It does not resolve the question of who Jesus actually was or is. The historical record can place a man named Jesus in 1st century Judea. It can confirm he was executed under Pontius Pilate. It can confirm that within decades of his death, people across the Roman Empire were organizing their lives around his name and dying rather than deny him. What it cannot do is tell you why. That is the question the stones and the documents and the ossuaries and the broken sewage pipes cannot answer. History can bring you to the edge of the question. It cannot cross it for you. The Roman writers recorded a man. The Jewish historian noted a teacher and his execution. The archaeologists found the bones of the man who condemned him, the pool where a blind man reportedly washed, the house of the fisherman who became his closest disciple. All of it is there. All of it has been examined. All of it withstood scrutiny. And at the end of all that examination, the most important question remains exactly where it has always been. Not in the ground, not in the archive, not in the laboratory. The evidence brought you here. What you do next is entirely up to you. This is scripture and stone. Here is what 2,000 years of scholarship, archaeology, and historical investigation have established. Jesus of Nazareth was a real person. He was born in 1st century Judea. He gathered followers. He was tried and executed under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Emperor Tiberius. This is not a matter of faith. This is not a theological claim. This is the conclusion of Roman historians who had every reason to ignore him. Of a Jewish court historian working for the empire that crucified him. Of archaeologists who were not looking for him when they found the evidence. The man existed. The debate, the real debate, begins exactly where history ends. What he was, what he meant, what happened 3 days after they placed him in a tomb. Those questions history cannot answer. But on the question of whether he walked this earth, whether he stood on the shores of Galilee, whether he entered the house of a fisherman in Capernaum, whether a Roman official named Pilate signed his death warrant, history has already answered. He was here. If this investigation changed the way you see the evidence, share it with someone who is still asking the question. In our next video, we go further. We examine the places Jesus walked, the roads, the cities, the shores, and what archaeology found when it started digging there. The ground remembers more than we expected. Subscribe to Scripture and Stone so you don't miss what comes next. And if this documentary made you think, leave a like. It tells us the investigation is worth continuing. We'll see you in the next one.